The Trump tariffs have taken effect and people are terrified. Now many are predictably panicking on a foreign front as foreign leaders are outraged at the idea of having to pay reciprocal tariffs back to America. And on the domestic front, citizens are panicking as well as they continue to watch the Dow Jones plummet from this complete 180-degree turn that President Donald Trump has implemented seemingly overnight. And when it comes to the liberal criticism of President Donald Trump and the tariff plans, I of course wouldn't even bother listening to any of that nonsense. But when it comes to a fellow conservative like Ben Shapiro's criticism of the Trump tariff plans, that I can respect and entertain with a somewhat open mind. But is Ben Shapiro missing the big picture on the Trump tariff plan? I think he is, and I'm going to simplify that all right now here on American Advocates. Sometimes people who are incredibly intelligent and smart have a tendency to hyper-focus on details and get lost in them, rather than seeing the big picture as a whole. I believe that's what Ben Shapiro is partly guilty of with this video that I'm going to react to right now. I'm going to react to a certain portion of it that stood out to me last night when I was watching it, because to a degree, I actually appreciate the simplified analogy that he made. So let's take a look.
Now, one of the things that President Trump is predicating his tariff war upon is the idea that trade deficits are inherently bad. A trade deficit is where we import more stuff than we export in terms of value. Now, as I've pointed out before, you have a trade deficit with literally every business that you do business with unless they are buying your product. So I have a trade deficit with my local Publix, a large trade deficit. They have bought pretty much nothing from me, and I've bought tens of thousands of dollars over the years from my local Publix.
Love the analogy, simplified for people like me and the rest of America who didn't go to school to study the economy. It's important to make analogies like that, but he misses the big picture still. Let's listen to the rest of his explanation though, because he does bring up good points.
Clearly they are screwing me, or maybe they're not, because I'm getting value for my dollar in the form of food and supplies. Or maybe I should go over to my Publix and just beat the living out of the general manager. I don't know, one of those two things.
Trump certainly would.
Trade deficits they're an accounting procedure. Trade deficits. You label something in export and you label something in import. But trade itself is about mutual benefit where you wouldn't do the trade in a voluntary system. So the idea that every trade deficit, someone is getting screwed, is a zero-sum view of how economies work, and it's not true.
Okay, here's where he's missing the big picture. I like his analogy of the Publix grocery store shopper because it's simplified, like I said, and he comes so close using that analogy to actually describing the big picture as a whole. I'm gonna fill in the rest of the story that he didn't cover, and as far as I can remember, doesn't actually cover in the video because he gets lost in the details of, well, their math is weird and the trade deficits aren't inherently bad. Here's the thing, Trump supporters and tariff backers don't disagree with that analysis. They don't disagree with the analysis of basically what Ben Shapiro describing there as a buyer-seller relationship with other countries. We acknowledge that. We agree with that analysis. The problem is we have a problem with that. We have a problem with that objective fact. We don't like that America has a buyer-seller relationship with some of these countries because we believe America could be doing so much more. Sticking to that Publix grocery store analysis, but creating a bigger picture around it, now let's pretend that that grocery store Publix shopper is there to buy eggs, tomatoes, onions, and green peppers. As they're cashing out, they see the prices ring up, they see their grand total, and as they're paying it, something pops up in the back of their mind going, wow, why am I paying for these items? But they ignore it, it's convenient, they buy the items, they go home with them. To make matters a little bit worse though, when they get home, they look at the tomatoes and they go, oh wow, these tomatoes, they're a little bit more green than I'd like. And they cut the onions up and they taste a piece of the onion, oh, that's a little more dull than I remember onions being. The peppers, oh, that's a little bit more bitter than I'd like my peppers to be. And then they crack the eggs and oh, the yolks, they're so light yellow and they're not as orange as I remember them being. And why do they remember them being different? Well, that's because this customer used to be a gardener. And when they gardened, they had their own chickens that produced their own eggs. And those eggs had vibrant, orange, healthy looking yolks. When it came to the tomatoes, well, they grew their own tomatoes, of course. And these tomatoes they plucked when they were perfectly ripe all the time. They were able to control the quality of those tomatoes better. And as a result, the tomatoes tasted better and were always perfectly ripe. On top of that, the onions that they grew, they remember having a much stronger taste to them. They grew them themselves. They didn't pick them before they were ready. And the peppers were always sweet tasting. Once again, because they grew them themselves from their own seed. And that's the big picture of all of this. And to fill it in even more, this gardener also remembers not only growing their own food that they were able to control the quality of better and also tasted better as a result, but they also remember that they had so much food that they grew that they would then go to the farmer markets periodically to sell off the extra food and make a nice little profit for themselves on top of it. That's not something they'd be able to do at their local Publix because Publix is not interested in buying from a local gardener. Even even if the quality of that local gardener's food is better. That local gardener would have to turn itself into a giant business, and then they'd be selling products that Publix already has. So Publix wouldn't want, you'd have to make the deal of a lifetime. This is kind of what happens with these tariffs when it comes to other countries. Countries like China, they don't want our cars. They make their own cars, and they want their citizens driving their cars. So they implement ridiculous tariffs on us. They make it almost impossible to sell there. It actually is impossible to sell there. Even allies like Japan, this is an example of Japan. It's not technically impossible to sell our cars there, but they make us jump through a bunch of hoops and loops, and they put all these tariffs on us. This is just how it works, and it is unfair in most American citizens' eyes. Tariff backers and Trump supporters do not want America only having a buyer relationship with other countries, especially countries like China, who are already our biggest economic rival. And to be fair, guys like Ben Shapiro, who are focused on the details and are the brainiacs of the world, they do expose some parts of the plan that it would be healthy to remain skeptical of. Some of that skepticism is rightfully centered around our own supply chain and how those have been weakened and become so inefficient over the years as we've learned to rely on buying more goods from other countries rather than creating our own and possibly even exporting them. However, I'd go back to the garden analogy once again when it comes to this, because the form of cynicism and skepticism I see mostly online, probably from liberals, around our supply chain basically comes with the narrative of, well, it's hopeless, it's too weak, we can't hold up to it, we may as well just keep buying goods from other countries and accept our fate. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. Maybe because I'm just too optimistic and possibly naive, but going back to the garden analogy, I would even state that that's like saying, well, I want to grow my own tomatoes again, but the soil is dead in my backyard. It needs to be refertilized, there's too many weeds, there's a lot of clay in the soil now too from not growing in it for too long. I'd have to retill it. I may as well just keep buying my tomatoes from Publix. No, you can keep doing that, but there's another practical alternative. Do you know what that is? Go out and start getting to work. Retill your soil, add fertilizer, pull the weeds, plant the tomato seeds, and in a short time, maybe even in a long time, depending on what kind of seeds you're planting, you will have tomato plants growing once again. That's how I look at it, and that's why it's important to keep your eyes on the overall vision and not just focus solely on the details, because the details will always look daunting. The vision is where it's at. And when you have your eyes set on the vision, like President Donald Trump does, then you don't concern yourself with the details the same way. In fact, he actually has advisors for that. Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, for instance. You're aware of the details, you're aware of the possible problems, and you're aware that there's problems that are going to happen that you can't foresee. But when you have the vision, you move forward anyway, and you adapt that plan according to what happens. That's what's going to happen here with President Donald Trump's tariff plan. And he's doing what you'd expect any other businessman to do, especially if you know most businessmen's origin stories. He's going all in on the vision, and he plans to adapt along the way. We'll see what the future holds. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It's 100% free. Stay up to date with everything I'm doing on this new channel here, American Advocates, because this is not the only video I'll be releasing on tariffs. There's a lot more I didn't cover. But as always, thanks for watching.